Welcome to this update with research company Vicore Pharma. I therefore welcome Vicore Pharma's CEO Ahmed Mousa and Dr. Francesco Bonella to the studio. Please welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Ahmed, could you please give us a brief overview over Vicore Pharma and the disease IPF that the company is now treating in the ongoing randomized phase 2b Aspire trial?
Absolutely, and thank you again for having us. Vicore Pharma is a company that's advancing drugs in a mechanism of action called the angiotensin 2 type 2 receptor, and we're seeking with our therapies to activate a system that can serve as a natural tissue repair system to drive that against diseases that are in the fibrotic space, starting with this disease, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, or IPF, which is such a terrible disease. It is a disease where unfortunately many patients only are able to live for a few years after diagnosis, and there is a lack of available therapies that can change this really tough picture. So we're quite motivated to continue to develop a drug, buloxibutid, against this disease that I'm excited to talk to you more about today.
Thank you, Ahmed. And Dr. Bonella, could you please give us a short description about yourself and your background, and also your expertise in IPF, and also your role as an investigator in Vicore's Aspire trial?
Sure. I am a respiratory physician working at the University Hospital Ruhrland Clinic in the north part of Germany. We are specialized in chronic respiratory lung disease, and we have a Center for Interstitial and Rare Lung Disease, which I lead. We perform all the diagnostic examinations for our patients, and then we start a standard of care treatment, and also we offer the participations to clinical trials to our patients. We have about 60 new diagnosed IPF patients per year, and the prevalent cases around 200-250 per year. And generally, our patients ask for clinical trials when there is a progression of disease or an issue with tolerability of the drug, with side effects. So we are really happy to provide this further therapeutic option to our patients. Yes, I'm very lucky. I have been chosen as a principal investigator for the Vicore trial because I strongly believe that another option for our patients it's really a great opportunity to at least slow down the disease or even to stop.
And could you please expand on Ahmed's comment about the unmet need in IPF?
There are several unmet needs in IPFs. Of course, the most important one is related to mortality, so we don't actually have any drug really stopping the disease and reducing the mortality over time. As Ahmed mentioned, so when untreated, the patients survive only 3 to 5 years. We have 2 licensed drugs for our patients, the so-called antifibrotic drugs from the first generation, pirfenidone and nintedanib, which can slow down the progression of disease and also have different side effects profile. But of course, this is also an unmet need. The side effects of these drugs, gastrointestinal, phototoxicity. So we can manage the side effects, but we are not happy about that because the quality of life of our patients is impaired, is affected. And another unmet need is that the standard of care, the antifibrotic drugs, do not impact the symptoms of patients. So we don't have any consistent or significant symptoms relief over time. Sometimes there is a signal about cough, reducing cough the first months of treatment, but the breathlessness remains and increases over time. Another issue related to antifibrotic drugs are the costs, of course. It's difficult, for example, to combine the drugs because of costs, reimbursement issues, but also lack of data about the combination. So we are happy about every new clinical trials providing also data on the combinations of the antifibrotic drugs. And another unmet need related to IPF is the lack of awareness, how lethal and fatal is the disease compared to other forms of cancer, for example. And this makes, of course, research even more difficult and raising funds to also to improve quality of life and treatment in our patients. These are the main unmet needs, I guess.
Quite substantial. How many patients suffer from IPF each year?
The disease has a prevalence around 20 to 80 per 100,000. So if we think to my country, to Germany, we expect around 200,000 people affected by or living with IPF, which is a huge number. Yeah.
Mm. What are the current approved treatment options? And what is the outlook now for patients being treated?
So we have two licensed drugs, pirfenidone and nintedanib, which can slow down the loss of lung volume over time in 1 year. And we know from the registries that it can also have an impact on mortality over time, so reduction of mortality up to 40%, which is not ideal, but it's a signal, and of course it means prolongation of survival for our patients. But the outlook also depends on the situation of the patients and in terms of other diseases the patients have, so-called comorbidities or the co-medication. Sometimes it's difficult to treat these patients with the standard of care because of the drug-drugs interaction. So every case is, of course, a single journey, I would say, but we need new drugs to, of course, to make the future better for these patients and easier, especially. Yeah.
Ahmed, now that the phase 2b Aspire trial is underway, can you give us an update on the trial?
Yeah, sure. And as a reminder, this is a study where we're investigating buloxibutid on top of the nintedanib standard of care. So patients who are already taking the standard of care that Dr. Bonella mentioned can join the trial to see what additional impact our therapy might have. Also for patients who have discontinued the standard of care for any reason, if there's progression or a lack of tolerability, can also join the study. And we measure then the impact of this drug primarily on lung function over a 1-year period, which is the so-called regulatory endpoint, or the endpoint that the EMA and the FDA and other health authorities are looking to, basically keep an eye on in order to determine whether or not to approve new therapy for IPF. So we initiated this study in September of last year. We are running this study in 14 different countries, of course, including in Germany, across about 100 clinical sites. We now have about 75% of those sites up and running, and we're actively screening and enrolling patients. And so far, we've been hearing from a number of clinical sites good interest in our therapy, and we believe there are a number of reasons for that. One is certainly that so far what we've seen is our therapy has a good overall tolerability profile, and so that can be attractive for patients who are interested in considering a clinical trial. Also, in the later stage of clinical development, there are a limited number of therapies currently being investigated in some of these bigger 52-week studies, although also very good for patients. There are also a number of phase 1 and earlier phase 2 studies also ongoing. So we're very pleased with the progress so far and excited to continue enrolling the study towards completion of that milestone.
Thank you. And Dr. Bonella, let's talk more about buloxibutid and the Aspire trial. How does the drug work?
Yes, the drug is very interesting from the mechanism of action profile because it's a broad impact on several pathways which are underlying the pathogenesis of lung fibrosis. Unfortunately, there is no single prevalent pathway in this disease, so every pathway counts, I would say, from the vascular point of view, for example, to the immune system, and of course the interstitium, which is the main place where the lung fibrosis occurs. which involves also several anatomic structures, so lymphatic vessels, blood vessels, and so on. And this is exactly what we expect from this compound, from buloxibutid, because the receptor for angiotensin II is broadly expressed on several cell types, alveolar macrophages in the peripheral airways, for example, but also fibroblasts and also immune cells and so on. And potentially can slow down the fibrotic cascade in the lung, but also improve vascularization, so vasodilation, so providing, of course, more blood in the peripheral and fibrotic area of the lung, and potentially reversing also fibrosis by enhancing some proteins which can degrade the collagen which has been accumulated in the interstitium, so in the lung. So I strongly believe that the rationale for the clinical trials and for the entire program is strong, and I have really hoped that it can not only stabilize or slow down the fibrotic process, but also stop and even reverse fibrosis.
Is it different from other drugs developed in IPF?
Yes, until now is quite different from other drugs because of the broad spectrum of action and the multi-pathway mode of action, so influences several pathways the same way. I think we need both in lung fibrosis, so drugs with a very targeted mechanism of action, but also drugs with a broad mechanism of action. The targeted mechanism of action will be more useful for a subgroup of patients, and the broad mechanism of action for the majority of the patients. So I'm talking about 70 to 80% of patients. So in the future, maybe the possible evolution of IPF treatment will be a combination of broad spectrum drugs with targeted therapy for specific subgroups of patients.
Okay, thank you. Ahmed, what recent changes have been in the competitive landscape, and what does that mean for Vicore and the ASPIRE trial?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first and foremost, as Dr. Bonella mentioned, in IPF, there's only 2 therapies that are currently available, and there are still a lot of unmet needs with those 2 therapies, the mortality and the symptoms in particular, as well as a side effect profile, as well as a relatively limited number of drugs in later stage development. So I certainly don't even think about it as a competitive landscape. We're excited to potentially offer one more therapy for IPF patients, but actually in many cases we think that these drugs might work on top of each other or have different types of segmentation. It's a tough disease for drug development. There has been several drugs that recently over the past year have unfortunately not worked in later phase 2 or even phase 3 studies. This of course is quite unfortunate from a patient perspective. Of course, one of the things this might help us with a little bit is the patient enrollment as we seek to bring the patients into the study to look at our mechanism in a big patient population and that regulatory endpoint, as I mentioned.
And Dr. Bonella, as an expert in the IPF field, do you have any additional thoughts on the unmet needs or the ASPIRE trial?
I would say, as just mentioned by Ahmed, I think it's very important to offer new compounds to our patients and also collect scientific data on efficacy, but also on safety, on the combination with other drugs, because every single data counts for the patients and also for science and for the future development of trials. Another problem we have, of course, is to find better endpoints in clinical trials, so better outcome measures, also including, of course, the patient's opinion about improvement in quality of lives, improvement of symptoms, for example. But we are working on that. So as researchers, as committed doctors in this field, we are trying, of course, to work also close with the companies to develop the best tools for clinical trials, but also for assessing everyday life of our patients.
Mm. And Ahmed, any last thoughts on what the market can expect from Vicore Pharma in the rest of 2025?
Yeah, so we're looking forward to continuing the enrollment of the study, and we'll keep the market updated on that. But also next week at one of the big pulmonary conferences, Vicore will be presenting a number of data sets, more of our phase 2A data set, where we see this very nice signal of actually improvement in lung function, which we're going to continue to investigate in the ongoing phase 2B. Also some preclinical studies where we'll actually compare our therapy to both some of the approved therapies as well as some of the therapies currently in phase 3. So looking forward to presenting that data next week at the medical conference and also sharing that with the broader market as well. And of course, very interestingly, there's been one drug by Boehringer Ingelheim where they've announced a positive phase 3 result. We're very excited to see what that data look like and then digest how Vicore will be able to be complementary to these emerging therapies as we continue to advance. And of course, what remains constant is that this is a very high unmet need, and I think from an investment perspective, it remains a very significant commercial opportunity as well.
Okay, thank both of you for all these insights into your important work.
Thank you.
Thank you.